Hey Jose, how are you today?
Pretty good, Toby. I'm excited. Great episode. Obviously we just had Nvidia earnings and just finished listening to their earnings call. So my mind is fresh and ready for any questions that might come in today.
Good, good. I'm glad. I have not had a chance to listen to the call yet. I was on earlier doing a live reaction up at 4 o'clock here. Uh, so I'm glad you've listened to that. I'm sure we'll get some questions on that. And one thing we want to do, fools, is you heard Dan and I earlier today just giving our initial impressions as the release was coming in. So we've had time to think about that a little bit. I think we've all had time to digest it. Jose especially has. So we want to get your deeper questions on that, give you a little more uh, some more color on what we think about this, and continue to answer whatever questions you might have. There were some other companies that put out earnings today too, and just a lot of activity, a lot of interest, I think, in the market right now, given Nvidia's report, which came in better than expectations, quite nice on the numbers, and the stock, Jose, hasn't done anything really after hours. Surprising, shocking to me. Are you surprised by this? That I mean, I- you would think an Nvidia of all companies would move on earnings, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of a little happy, Toby, because his in the past few quarters, it has kind of beaten earnings and expectations on the average side, and still kind of seen a bit of a decrease the next during
Mm,
after hours. So it being quiet right now, I'm actually happy. I'm happy it's not at the other the rightish side.
nice, nice. Well, let me ask you this as we give people a minute to get questions in here that they might have about Nvidia specifically. Um, since you listened to the earnings call, what are a couple of your general takeaways from that? Did you hear anything interesting that might not be reflected in the actual press release?
There's a few things that I found. I think during this earnings call, there have been a lot of investors that have been worried about the whole DeepSeek drama. And during the earnings call, Jensen kind of explained how DeepSeek is actually a great thing for them, especially as their Blackwell platform. Their overall goal, Toby, is for AI to be so cheap that it's running 24/7. So
Okay.
I think Jensen and management team really wanted to kind of maybe I think there are certain investors that felt like the DeepSeek drama was uncalled for, but then there were still some that are were seeing kind of the bearish case for it.
Mm.
So I think the team was really trying to push that sentiment a little bit better. The other thing that I found pretty interesting, Toby, is another bearish case that's coming out for NVIDIA's big tech developing their own chips.
Mm.
And there was a question of these chips are usually called ASIC solutions or custom ASIC. And Jensen mentioned, he's like, I don't really have much to say in that space. They're just NVIDIA's just developing at such rapid levels that at the end of the day, these big tech players need to make a final decision. Even though they design a chip, it doesn't mean it goes into production. And if NVIDIA's chips at that time of when they have to decide are so much better off, then that team is not going to build their own chip and they're just going to continue to buy NVIDIA's products. So I think NVIDIA is just showcasing its competitive stance and saying that, hey, look, sure, there's custom ASIC solution, but we're not standing still. I'll probably mention some others throughout the episode, Toby. But one really interesting note also that I found out is fiscal year, Toby, this company made $60.7 billion in free cash flow. This
Yeah.
actually made more free cash flow this year, Toby, than Amazon. Amazon did 32 billion in this year.
Oh, wow.
It actually did more free cash flow than Meta Platforms. Meta Platforms did 54 billion. Nvidia did 61. It's about $8 billion, $8 to $9 billion short from being one of the top, it being in the top two of free cash flow from the other Max 7. So many people, it's becoming a free cash flow monster right now.
Yeah, that was really impressive, I gotta say, when I saw those free cash flow numbers. That's something else. Now they spent a ton of that on buying back stocks too, right? It seems like they almost have more cash flow than they know what to do with right now. So buying back a stock at a rapid clip, which, hey, I guess in a couple years we'll be able to say whether that was a good move or not. when we look back and see what the stock does. Um, so Sadif asked us about the guidance. Anything about NVIDIA guidance? I know that they had a little bit of that in the press release. They're looking for, I think it amounts to a little bit less than 10%, uh, a 10% increase from this quarter in revenue going forward. 43 billion is what they're targeting. Wall Street analysts seem to be a little ahead of that, maybe, but not by much. Did they give any more color on the guidance in the call, or they just going
Yeah.
with pretty much the $43 billion in revenue?
Just pretty much the 43 billion. I believe this is still a company that its revenue is capped, Toby, by the ability of its manufacturers being able to build its AI chips. I think one thing that Wall Street, maybe investors were not excited about was the guidance on margins. So we had already expected margins to get into the low 70s. Nvidia has talked about that as Blackwell production was ramping up. They expected margins to drop to the low 70s. But this year, Toby, this quarter, they guided margins as low as 70.6. So we're really close to kind of now entering into the high 60s, right? So 70.6 in margins. I think the market was a little bit worried about that. And some of the questions came out about that in the Q&A session. And NVIDIA's response is, right now, what they really want to focus on, Toby, is ramping up their supply chain as quickly as possible. And that speed up is causing a bit of a pain in margins, but they still believe that by the second half of this year, once Blackwell's in full production, they can go back to the mid 70s in margins. So it seems to be a short-term pressure on margins. And it's not, I want to say it's not like it was a complete like curveball, because we did hear from NVIDIA last quarter that the guidance was going to be low on margins. I just think we weren't thinking this low 70s percentage.
Yeah, and I did notice that if you look at the full year, margins are still up from last year, or the full year. It's this fourth quarter, which I just say when they were doing that ramp up for Blackwell, that they really got hurt there. And I think that's kind of um, the one negative I was able to find in this report. Otherwise, it looks really, really good, right? So hopefully they bounce back from that pretty quickly. But it makes sense, right? You're ramping up a new production. There's going to be some costs associated with that for sure as you start to get that to scale. Do we know what they're going to do with this cash? Have they made any? Did they say any plans about capex? I expect they'll continue to buy back stock at a reasonable rate. I don't expect them to increase their dividend by a drastic amount at all, if at all. But did they say anything like the other big tech companies on, we're going to spend? I mean, it's a little bit different, right? The big tech companies, the other ones, are spending to buy NVIDIA stuff, right? So they're in a little bit of a different situation. But did they make any comments on capex or anything like that?
Not in this earnings call, Toby, but throughout this past 3 months, I know NVIDIA's CFO was at a conference, and they kind of asked that question. Hey, look, you're becoming a massive free cash flow machine. You have about $42 billion in cash is what they have right now. What are your thoughts on building this cash position? Or what are you going to do? So the company mentions the first and most important thing is they're going to focus on research and development. And so there have been reports, Toby, that this company has about 5 to 6 teams all working on different chips and kind of like, hey, which is the best direction to go about it? So this is one of the reasons they're able to kind of come up with a chip on a yearly basis, is because they have so many teams working on it. So they want to focus on that. That is their first priority, continue to increase research and development. The second, Toby, they kind of talked about was focusing in acquisitions that can enhance their core products or their software solutions. We haven't seen too much of that so far, Toby, but maybe who knows, there have been talks that the current administrations may be a little bit easier on acquisitions if it improves a US based company and improves kind of the tech positioning. So maybe NVIDIA might announce some acquisition. I think the third thing is return to shareholder. That's kind of their last priority, is return to shareholder via dividends or buyback. So while they do buy, I think this quarter they bought about $8 to $9 billion of shares. It seems like that's not really their priority, and they're focusing their money elsewhere.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I know they did open up. I'm trying to remember where it was. I believe they opened up a new R&D center. Yeah, in Vietnam. So they have a new R&D center in Vietnam. They opened this quarter. So that's definitely a focus for them. And it's not, they're putting it. They seem to be going in different geographies too, so they can attract the right kind of talent in all around the world to do this stuff for them. We have a question from Let It Ride on the gaming revenue. I did notice this, Jose. This was a pretty substantial decrease year over year, and it looks to me like the gaming segment is lower revenue than it's been in about a year and a half. Do you have any thoughts around that? Is that just because maybe they were capacity constrained in some regards, or is there just a general slowdown in the gaming industry that would make that come down a little bit? And do we even care? Right? It's like 2.5 billion versus over 30 for the data center revenue.
Yeah. So the only color they gave Toby here is that there was supply limited to supply for the gaming chips. Um and they say it's going to get better throughout the upcoming quarters. I also want to say we have kind of seen kind of a inventory correction in the PC space, in the consumer space. So I wonder if that also played some effect into this market. Does it matter? While it is still small, I mean, 2.5 billion of 40 billion is a little bit over 5% of total revenue. So it
Yeah,
could be that magic way of beating expectations, right? If
right.
they do a little bit better on this, it can definitely help with beating expectations or maybe underperforming a little bit. So definitely not data center level, but I do believe it could be a difference between beating expectations or missing.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Um, you look at their other divisions too, right? So we have data center revenue is like for the quarter was 35.5 billion. Let's call it that. Um, Gaming 2.5, professional visualization 500 million, automotive and robotics a little under 600 million. So data center is where it's at. Like it's not no question. Like that is where it's at right now. But I mean, you see, you have to feel like these other three divisions do have some promise and some potential. Do we see a scenario in the next couple of years where data center starts to slow? Because it's not going to. I mean, I don't want to say it can't, but I don't think we're going to be growing at the rates we've seen, at least the year-over-year growth rates, indefinitely. That just can't happen. Um, do you think something like the automotive segment or the visualization segment could start to pick up some of the growth? Because they're growing pretty fast. Automotive only 570 million this quarter, but it was over double the revenue from a year ago. So it's really, really rapid growth we're seeing in these smaller segments.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, this market is very cyclical, and I think that cyclicality is going to stay, especially in the data center market. Maybe the length of this cycle might be a little bit longer than historicals. But I agree with you that we're not going to keep growing at these levels in the future. And there will be maybe a time where we might even start to see a bit of a slowdown. It's typical in the semiconductor space. Now, if I was to choose one of these other markets that had great opportunities, I think it's the automotive segment, Toby. Jensen kind of talked a little bit about that. I forget the number he gave. I don't know if it's true. I think it was like, he mentioned that there's about 1 billion vehicles on the world right now, all over the world. And none of them a very low percentage of them, if any, are truly autonomous. What's going to happen when there's that technology transformation of autonomous vehicles? NVIDIA can provide a lot of chip solutions for that, a lot of software solutions. So I do believe the automotive market has the biggest optionality to grow to a multi-billion dollar pretty quickly. The other thing, Toby, is the automotive space. Those chips can also be used in the robotics industry.
Yeah.
And again, that's another optionality. We don't really see that market right now, but with AI and a lot of discussions of robotics eventually in the far future for the consumer space. I believe out of all those segments, the automotive has the higher probability of becoming a multi-billion-dollar run rate business for them.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about robotics earlier today too. So, if I think the ambitions in that space start to play out in a big way, you're talking drone deliveries, automation, that sort of thing. There's certainly a place for NVIDIA in that world for sure. And hey, maybe I don't know. Maybe we see them split the automotive and robotics into two separate divisions at some point, just because there's so much potential there on one side or the other. Who knows? So yeah, a lot to like. A lot to like about this, Jose. Is there anything you didn't like?
Yes. So I think there's three things I didn't like. First, we still have uncertainty about future tariffs that can impact NVIDIA. And right now we do see that the market really cared that these low 70 margins were pretty low. So tariffs could potentially drop it a little bit more. So it's worrisome of if we see some tariffs, how can that impact this kind of margins hit or margin portfolio, especially because during the earnings call, it seemed like management wasn't pricing that into margins because they just don't know if tariffs are going to come in or when they're going to come in. So they couldn't really give investors a true calculations of how the impact is. So you still have that uncertainty on tariffs. The second uncertainty, Toby, I would say that I as an investor, something to just think about is they also mentioned that while China is still a smaller portion than it was before, it's still growing on a sequential basis. And what happens if the current administration or whatever, even in the future, the next, 4 years from now, the next administration, what if they continue to put even more pressure on export restrictions? So kind of that uncertainty of the Chinese revenue, because NVIDIA does make still multi-billions of dollars per quarter from China. Their H20, which is a chip that is approved to be sent to China. What happens if that cuts off? Like how is the market gonna react to that? So that's another uncertainty. And the third one, Toby, is I'm pretty curious to see why NVIDIA they mentioned that the reason they're taking this low margin hit in the low 70s is because they just want to ramp up their volume as quick as possible. And I'm just trying to picture why they're willing to trade that up. What are they scared of? Of why do they need to sell all these chips right now? Why couldn't they just wait maybe an extra quarter or so for those margins to not really be that hurtful or kind of see that headwind? What for me on the view, I think that NVIDIA is just scared of NVIDIA. They mentioned that their Blackwell Ultra is expected to still come out in the second half of this year. So maybe they're just trying to, hey, look, we have all this supply for the B200s. We want to get rid of it before we get to the Blackwell Ultra. So it's like NVIDIA fighting itself. But I wonder if there's another reason why they're trying to accelerate those sales as quick as possible.
Yeah, and that goes to a question we just got from Let It Ride, who asked, did Jensen Huang give any insights to future development to provide any wisdom on the future? And it looks like they still have that timeline for Blackwell Ultra. So this year, right? Later this year. Did they say anything about anything beyond that, or are we kind of just waiting to see what happens with that?
Jensen just mentioned, hey, come see us at GTC, which is this upcoming March,
Okay.
a few weeks from now. And they have a lot of things. They mentioned that this Blackwell platform, the one we're in right now, the just vanilla Blackwell, did have a few months of delay. But even
Yeah.
because this one had a few months of delay, they're not stopping the ramps of their other ones. They're going to continue. It's not pushing anything back. So that's why Blackwell Ultra seems to be coming in so quickly. And he did mention that the next generation Vera Rubin is what is discussed is still on track for late 2026, for the second half of 2026. So that yearly cadence, right? So Blackwell Ultra, the second half of 2025, and Vera Rubin the second half of 2026. So he says all that is still in schedule. And even though they had this delay on Blackwell, they're not pushing their products further out. They're keeping with that timeline.
Nice. Okay. So well, I mean, yeah, that'll be good. I'm sure it'll sell well. About I saw about 11 billion for Blackwell, they said this quarter, and they're just starting to kind of ramp that up. So um, I I don't know. Do we think that makes up a majority of the revenue in next quarter, or not going to quite get there yet? Because they need about 22 or so. They need to double that revenue. Uh,
Yeah.
if you know based on their own
Mhm.
guidance.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, Toby. I think by next quarter we can, if not, be very close to at least 50%.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing is, it's curious because the data center revenue, Toby, also includes some of their networking solutions. So it's just not, it's not just pure Hopper and Blackwell.
Right.
It's also kind of networking. So I wonder if that 11 billion in Blackwell is only Blackwell chips, or is the Blackwell and networking
Well,
solutions that
yeah,
go with,
that's
yeah.
it.
So,
Right.
but I think in the way they're responding it, I think we could probably get closer to 50% by next quarter of total data center coming from Blackwell platform.
Nice. Jimbo asked an interesting question, Jose. He asked us, what market cap do you see for NVIDIA in 3 years, 5 years, or in 10 years? I mean, that's a good question. Where are they at now? Are we, let's see here. I'm looking this up here. So right now we're at 3.2 trillion, Jose. Um, man, you really want to say a company that's growing well at a nice rapid clip, um, you know, doubling your market cap in 5 years is not unreasonable, right? That accounts to what? That's like a not even 20% annualized growth, right? That's like around 15%, even a little less than 15%.
A little bit,
Uh,
I think around 14 or 15
yeah.
around there.
So
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable. Um, revenue growth obviously does not directly correspond to market cap growth. Even so, uh, man, could this really be a $6 or $7 trillion company in 5 years? That is hard for me to envision. And yet they're already at 3 trillion. I don't know. Um, but this is what you need to think about, I think, fools, when you're thinking to yourself, if I invest in Nvidia now, what's my return going to look like? Think about it in market cap terms, because if you want to double your money in Nvidia, you need to get to over 6 trillion. That's something else. Uh, if you want to get a 3x, you're looking at almost a $10 trillion market cap company. That is ridiculous in terms of what we envision now. Um, do we see that happening? And there, look, I have a hard time seeing a universe, Jose, in which Nvidia gets to 10 trillion and Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Alphabet all stagnate, right? You feel like they're going to have to be along there with for the ride. And so, are we seriously looking at a universe where the Magnificent Seven are approaching 10 trillion each in a decade? That would be that's remarkable if that happens. I hesitate to make that my thesis, right? I mean, that seems hard, but the run up in the last couple of years has been remarkable too. So maybe so. I don't know. It's hard for me. It's hard for me, Jimbo. I don't know. But I feel like if you want to make this a good investment over the next decade, uh, you got to think to yourself around 7 trillion to get a market beating return. It's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, Toby, many might think I'm like a perma bull from Nvidia, but I just, those are realistic thoughts, right? That how can this go from a $3.5 trillion to seven? It's almost in. I just can't think of the only way. I think we get to those and I feel like I've said this a few times where if you're an NVIDIA investor right now, you really have to be bullish in the AI space and the innovative speed in this market. If in 5 years, Toby, we do kind of have AI really kind of pushing the boundaries in the robotics market, if it really does have the world changing, we have things like AI agentic solutions where we have softwares really running our things, then yes, I could see this being a $7 trillion company. If we have more things like autonomous drones, autonomous robotics, and just the robotics market just picking up. Now, again, you just have to be bullish in innovation, and we have to see
Yeah.
those innovative takes place. Because I mean, a few years ago, we didn't know about ChatGPT or large language models, but the innovation of AI is what got this company to get to $3 trillion, right? Is the next leg of innovation in the AI space what's going to break this to double to $6, $7 trillion in 5 years? I think there's the possibility. I do believe there's the possibility of that happening, but we need to continue to see innovations in this space.
Yeah, I think that's key. I don't want to say no because one, I'm optimistic about innovation generally. Um, and as Pro Shop Guy points out, how many people predicted 3 trillion when you didn't even have a $1 trillion company, right? And now we have multiple there. Um, yeah, and maybe the pace of technological innovation and just technology itself allows a company to get to that scale and still be run relatively efficiently. You worry about that too. At what point do you get so big that you can't manage it effectively, and does that become a problem? Um, but hey, let's and to Jimbo's point too. We want to recognize the room for growth, he says, in the next several years. If we don't buy NVIDIA now, then when? Or should we not buy it at all? It's a great business, Jimbo, and that's where I struggle. The valuation looks hefty, but it is a fantastic business, and they have delivered quarter in and quarter out over the last couple of years. There's hard to say anything bad about what they've done. That by itself, if market cap and valuation aside, the consistency of what they've done uh, makes me want to own this business, right? Uh, if a $100 billion company had been delivering the way they've been delivering, oh, I'd be in that without a hesitation. So maybe I should own this stock, right? And if I don't buy it at 3 trillion, am I going to want to buy it at 4 trillion? I mean, to Jimbo's point, where, like, when? I just struggle. I struggle with it, Jose. But uh, maybe this is a situation where it's hard for us to wrap our minds around that sense of scale. Um, but it's certainly possible, I think. And I don't, Nvidia has as good a chance as any of the other big tech companies of getting there, the way they've been performing.
And,
Yeah.
and uh, another thing is not just with their core products, but now with all these. I think another thing that Nvidia has going for itself, Toby, is because of this massive cash position, and they're kind of are a first seat player, or they're in the front row seat player of this AI space. I think they can, if they find an interesting market that can evolve dramatically, or quickly, they would be one of the first players to be able to see that transition. So who knows? Maybe they can kind of use that cash to make an acquisition in industries that they believe can turn around pretty quickly, thanks to the power of AI. So I think the one asset that they have is they are literally in the front row seat, maybe even closer than the front row seat, in this AI space. So they can definitely see what markets are evolving, almost nearly in real time solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, right. I mean, and this is a company that it's going to be a volatile ride, right? It historically has been. There's no reason to think it won't be going forward. We have had multiple drawdowns of 50%, et cetera, in this business. A fun game you could play with yourself, guys, is ask yourself, from here, right? From right here, what happens first? 4 trillion market cap or 2 trillion market cap? Uh, and and whichever one happens first, don't think that the other one won't also happen, right? I mean, they could go down first and then up, and up first and then back down. I am I wouldn't be shocked when we hit both those numbers from here at some point, Jose. Uh, yeah, I love it. I love what this company's done. It's good stuff. Uh, is is there something else you want to hit besides NVIDIA that you're thinking about today? I know we did get some questions on some other earnings. I don't know if you follow um, uh, some of these. I think I don't know if they talked about Synopsis at the last in the last hour, but I know they reported today, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so Synopsis, I think they report. Yeah, last time I checked, I only saw their numbers. Not the numbers, but the price action. When they reported it, the stock is up about. It was up 2% today, Toby, and it's up 2.6% after hours, sitting at
Okay.
482. Toby, normally I don't, and for those that are not familiar, Synopsis, this is ticker SNPS, and Synopsis helps companies develop, design, and kind of simulate their chips. So if you're designing a chip, you're going to most likely use Synopsys products. So right now in this AI market and also in kind of this robotic stage, Internet of Things, smart home, everything needs some form of chips. So Synopsys definitely has that growth opportunity. These are more of software-based companies, Toby. So they kind of trade in software margins. So these tend to be a lot more expensive in valuations compared to the other players. And normally I stay away from Synopsys and its competitor Cadence. But with recent valuations, Toby, I'm gonna try my best to not talk about this one as this one looks really attractive to me. So in the long term, I think
Nice.
Synopsys has great tailwinds. Um, and yeah, it has a lot of opportunities and it's a great the thing about Synopsis, Toby, and if we do have these cycles in the chip space, but no matter if there's a weakness in the semiconductor market right now, those same semiconductor companies are still developing the next chip for 2 years from now or 3 years from now. So they don't really get too much of that negative pressure like the overall semiconductor space. So it's a great way to get software exposure and semiconductor exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Foolish just asked Synopsis or Cadence. Uh, do you have a favorite?
I don't think I have a true favorite. For some reason, I've always been more attracted to Synopsys as an
Okay.
investment, even though I've never had them. While they both do hit the same markets, Toby, they both have kind of tried to find ways to differentiate themselves. I know one is focusing more on kind of like engineering simulations as a second growth opportunity, and the other one is looking more at life simulation, life science as a second growth opportunity for them. So they both hit the chip market, and both of them are trying to become a little bit different than each other's by chasing other market opportunities. So whichever you believe has a better opportunity, I think would be the answer for every investor. But I think normally they trade at similar valuations.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Um, all right. Where do we go from here? So we spent about 30 minutes talking about NVIDIA, a little over 30 minutes. We can continue to do that if people want to ask us questions. We're happy. We're happy to continue talking uh, uh, NVIDIA. But if you've got other things you want us to talk about, tech related or what I want to say, NVIDIA adjacent, we can call it that. We can answer some of those questions as well. Um, so yeah, do you see anything you want to hit, Jose, right now?
I'm looking down about 3 hours ago, Toby. Dave N had a question. Any hope for Surf Robotics since NVIDIA dumped them? What do they know? So I think we did that. Was it today, Toby, that we did that robotics episode?
Yeah,
I'm
we did it
losing.
earlier this morning. Yeah, it kind of bleeds together, huh?
So I don't think NVIDIA dropping them is necessarily bearish for Surf Robotics. I mean, in forms of investment, it was less than, I think it was even less than 0.5% of NVIDIA's total cash position. So very, very small investment for Surf Robotics. I think another thing that might be happening, Toby, and I don't know how true this is, but just my own hypothesis theory is NVIDIA is trying to be that player that provides a solution for every robotics company. for every type of AI company. And I don't know if it may look bad for certain customers. Hey, look, you're investing in serve robotics. Maybe it might not be the best approach for me to buy your chips as you're investing in another robotics play. So I wonder if NVIDIA is just trying to eliminate maybe that resistance from some customers by saying, hey, look, yeah, we really don't care who wins in the robotic space. We're not really going to invest in anybody. So like that, everybody feels comfortable coming to us for their chips. So I don't think it's necessarily bearish for serve robotics. And if it was a reason, for some reason, my gut feeling is telling me that NVIDIA is just like, hey, look, there's no point in us having these types of investments, especially if they're so small right now.
Yeah, I think there may be some truth to that. Because I honestly don't think they do care who wins in the robotic space, as long as the person who wins and everyone else who's competing buys chips from NVIDIA, right? That's the ultimate end game here, right? Buy your stuff from us, and then we'll keep on building. So that does make sense, Jose. Let's see. AMD, thoughts on AMD? Is there any takeaway we have on AMD from NVIDIA's earnings? Do they continue to look well? They're clearly. I don't know. I don't feel like NVIDIA is losing any ground.
Yeah, definitely. Toby, NVIDIA is not losing any ground. The only hope I'm bullish in AMD, Toby, and it's not necessarily for their AI accelerators. AMD, the great thing about them, right, Toby, is they have a lot of segments that matter for them. For example, like you mentioned, or we kind of mentioned earlier on, for NVIDIA, it only really depends on the data center space, right? It's almost 90%. For AMD, they have a lot of markets that they can grow, that can really move the bottom line number. And those other markets are ones that they're either leading or taking market share. Um, I don't think NVIDIA is losing any sleep with the competition of AMD, but the market is growing so quickly, and we are in a supply constraint market where if the market is growing too quickly and they're unable to provide to fill their data centers or their investments with NVIDIA chips, I think they would go to like, hey, look, AMD, we have some extra spare room. We need to increase our capacity. We'll buy a few chips from you. And for them, a few chips could be a good thing, right? I mean,
Right.
Blackwell did 11 billion this quarter ramping up, and AMD did 5 billion a year on their full system after full product reduction ramp. So you can kind of see the big difference
Right.
in 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 level field right now.
Yeah, and I'm curious about this. What is
Oh, but I never answered that question. 5 to 10 years, I think AMD will definitely be a market beating performer. I don't see this being $1 trillion company, but I see it definitely outperforming in the market. I think a market cap of less than 200 billion. So in
yeah.
5 years, I could see 400 billion and still outperforming the market and not hitting that $1 trillion cap.
Yeah, oh, definitely, right? I think it's around 170 or something around there is where I'm seeing. So yeah, well under 200. And right, if you so in 10 years, if you even if you double twice, which is a nice clip, right? A double every 5 years, you're still you're still less than 800 billion, right? So you got to do a lot of work if you're NVIDIA, if you're AMD to get to 1 trillion, which everyone would cheer and celebrate for sure if they did it. But I don't think they have to get there for people to be excited about what they're doing, for sure. Um, I haven't looked. So there's a question from Let It Ride on Salesforce earnings. I haven't looked at Salesforce earnings yet. Did they report? They reported yesterday. Is that right?
I think it was today after hours
Today.
as well,
Okay.
Toby. My original yeah, the stock is down about 5%, after hours. Um, and yeah, I don't really follow this stock too much, Toby. The only thing I know is Salesforce CEO really hates Microsoft CEO or Microsoft in general. The competitive in that AI agents is real. But outside of that, it's not a company I follow too much.
Yeah, revenue revenue looks like came at 9.99 billion, which is just short. Just that makes me think, I mean, not that I think anyone is ever cooking the books, but if you were, you'd probably hit 10 billion, right? Um, so 8% year over year, that's a little bit in below their expectations from analysts. So revenue a little light. Um, uh, for them, 9% increase for the whole full year. So it looks like a little bit of a slowdown in Q4. 13 billion in operating cash flow with a full year. Not bad. Not bad at all. Up 28%. And their guidance came in a little light, Jose. 40.5, between 40.5 and 40.9 billion. Analysts were looking for a little over 41 billion. So maybe that's why we're seeing the stock down after hours, because of that light, that lightish guidance we see. But it doesn't look bad. Like, they're right. Yeah, they missed revenue expectations, but just barely. They're right there. So it looks fine to me.
I, I I think we
Yeah, go
talked.
ahead.
I don't know if it was with you, Toby. I know one of these slides we talked about kind of the AI market and how the AI market. I see two opportunities in the AI space. First is new companies coming in and creating some new solution, but these are going to be your high risk, high reward speculative plays. Then you have your big companies that have a lot of data in their platform, and they're able to use AI to increase their core product. And by increasing their core product, they can increase their free cash flow, reduce their expenses, improve earnings per share, improve overall efficiency of that product. And I think that's where Salesforce falls in. They have the data to be able to increase their solutions. And I know one thing they're talking a lot about, Toby, is AI agenic or AI agents, which are kind of software tools or agents that will be able to help with a lot of the task. Um, I think we're getting close to that as I've seen large language models continue to evolve, but I still believe we're at least a few months to maybe a year from that before we really start to see more improvements in that space where I think Salesforce can probably dominate in. So it's definitely one of the core products that has the optionality to grow.
Yeah. And they're not. I was just checking to see if they were. I couldn't remember if they were in the Stargate project. They're not. Salesforce is not in the Stargate initiative. Oracle is the one who got that. Sort of, not quite in the exact same space as Salesforce, but yeah, it looks like it's ARM, Mike. It's in terms of the equity, it's SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, and MGX. Providing the funding for that. So, yeah. All right. Let's see what else we got here. We got about 15 minutes left, so we have a little bit of time here to answer some questions. Mobileye just came in, a question from Ken 1952. Thoughts on Mobileye? This is who did they just do a deal with? Was it Lyft that they have a partnership with?
I think I don't know if it's Lyft Waymo. It was definitely one of those
Yeah.
companies. Let me see. Mobileye. I think it might be Waymo. Mm, well, you might be right. Let me see. But what you searched at, Toby, I'll share my quick thoughts. I think we talked about this one a little bit in the robotics
Yeah.
segment that we did earlier on. I think 5 to 10 years, this is one that is it's creating a product for an emerging technology. They're creating chips, hardware, and some software solutions for things like autonomous vehicles. So it's very hard to kind of try to think about 1092, in my opinion, 5 to 10 years out. I think it's just how the market evolves in the next 5 to 10 years. There's definitely the optionality for it to grow, but it's very hard to kind of price in valuations on the market that we're still in early innings, that there's competitive pressure in, and that continues to advance. But from what I'm seeing, they're producing great chips, they're producing great hardware. So at least there's evidence that they're moving in the right direction. And they do have some big investors on their side. Like I think Intel still owns a good portion of the business.
Yeah, so they do have a partnership with Lyft that was announced late last year. Lyft announced, excuse me, deals with May Mobility, Mobileye, and Nexar, which is the dash cam maker of dash cams. Towards their autonomous efforts. Um, there. So I mean, they have partnerships with a bunch of people, but I think it was the Lyft one that I was remembering uh, uh, most recently. Um, yeah, it's a good. This was the this this was it. It's come from Intel, Mobileye. It was the
Yep,
Intel
yep.
spinoff,
So,
right?
so
Yeah,
well, I think they were originally an independent company, and then
right.
Intel bought them, and then they spin them off again, just a
Yeah,
few years
I,
later.
I mean, best thing Intel had going for them at the time, and in retrospect, that looks like unfortunate. Um, yeah, so this is it's right in the autonomous space, and as you noted, I like. I mean, I like Mobileye. You like Mobileye. Travis likes Mobileye. He's talked about that a lot. If you're interested in the autonomous driving space, this is certainly one you can't overlook. I think as a
Yeah,
potential basket of autonomous solutions here.
yeah. I think in Europe, Toby, or certain parts of Asia, they already have kind of some robo taxis running around, kind
Yeah,
of collecting data. So, it at least showcases more evidence that it's not just a hype company. They have some core products that are working already in real world example. Now it's just to say, would they be able to compete, to have this competitiveness when the market really takes off? And again, a lot of competition, but a lot of growth with it.
yeah, about a $13 billion company right now, so not too big. Certainly, certainly a nice one. Um, all right, let's see what else we have here. We can take a look at. Uh, ServiceNow, interesting. We just my Pro Shop guy dropped that uh, uh, in our chat as a company that's applying artificial intelligence. Uh, you're seeing that more and more. I think from companies out there. Um,
Toby, I do
oh,
have a question for
yeah,
you. Now that we're kind of, it seems like NVIDIA is kind of the end for most hardware and semiconductor companies. And we already kind of had the financial wave. We already had kind of like the big tech market. It seems like now we're going to finish off normally with the software wave. Are there any software companies that you own, that you follow, that you're kind of excited about for either this upcoming week or month?
yeah. That's a good question, Jose. You know, I follow the big tech companies, obviously. I mean, who doesn't, right? With software, most of them have already given us their reports, though. That wave has come. Those big players. I don't, I haven't even checked who's coming at us uh, next week. Let me see. Let me pull this up and see. That is a good question. We should think about that. Uh,
And just for the fools, tomorrow is actually going to be another interesting day, at least in the space and popularity. I mean, we have SoundHound, which I'm not a fan of, but I know it's become very popular in the investing community. It's reporting tomorrow. Another popular one in the community right now, in the social, especially this social financial community, is Archer, that has gotten a lot of popularity. Again, the one that I'm not
yeah,
excited about, but it is reporting earnings tomorrow. Dell Technologies is another player. This is going to be one that kind of discusses maybe the AI space. And one that I don't follow, but I don't know why I've been curious of it, is Duolingo. I think Duolingo has done amazing in forms of stock price returns. So want to see how they continue to do. Duolingo is one of those educational companies, Toby, that has really done a great way of implementing AI without reducing its moat. Just like Chegg, I think reported a few days ago, and we saw how Chegg is pretty much falling apart with AI really kind of taking a lot and a lot, or destroying its moat. But Duolingo was able to use it properly, it seems.
that's an interesting comparison between those two, Jose. Right, Chegg versus Duolingo. And you're right. Like Chegg seems to be done. Um, it's hard to sell something that you can get for free, especially if your target audience is college students who never saw a free they didn't love. Uh, but yeah, I'm actually pleased that Duolingo has been able to, because I think they've integrated it well themselves with their own platform, right? and made it fun. They've targeted maybe a younger demographic than Chegg was going after to get kind of that lock in early, and they make it not that expensive to use their platform. They've made a nice push of expanding beyond languages recently, I think, which is kind of going to be a key to their growth. So they're doing it quite well. It's the answer to your other question, Jose. I had this one had blanked in my mind, but you know what we got coming at us on Tuesday? Next Tuesday is CrowdStrike earnings, and that's going to be a big one. I think in the security space, the SaaS software security space. They seem to be recovering well from that unfortunate mishap last summer when they basically bricked everyone's Microsoft systems. But that seems to be behind them. We don't see there's still some lingering liability for that potentially, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a huge deal. Their customers seem to have reacted collectively with an approach that says, you know what, maybe they screwed up once, but they're so super important, we're going to give them a pass on this one, and just hope they don't screw up again. I guess they better not, right? I don't know if you can do that twice in a row and have people coming back to you, but I'm going to look at that one very closely. That is going to be one to watch to see how are they fully recovered. Are they going to throw some surprise at us in terms of liability there? Or are they just going to continue to be the dominant security player? So that's one I think we're all going to look at. We did get a question from Gopi here. Can you talk about Archer as well? You said you're not excited about Archer as much. This is the eVTOL. Is that what we call them? Electric vertical eVTOL.
Takeoff.
Takeoff and landing. eVTOL.
Takeoff. Yeah.
I don't like. We need a better word. Yeah. Why do you not? What does not excite you about them? I should ask. Or is it concerns about valuation, or just you don't think it's quite there?
And I think it's maybe that I don't like it was pretty strong. I do think maybe valuations have stretched a bit for Archer. I think AI is going to revolutionize a lot of these mobility solutions. So be it companies like Archer can obviously benefit in the future with AI. But I think right now, in terms of which one has the best market opportunity and the biggest growth opportunity of kind of technology evolving faster, I think is still in the autonomous vehicle market. I don't think we're yet in that space where eVTOLs or whatever, however it's called, are going to become a popular product where so many people are using it, and we're going to see this massive total addressable market come out of nowhere. So it's more of like, well, technology is innovating in that space. I would say maybe the market might be expecting too much in the short term, but there is definitely opportunity in the long term. And I think it's okay for me to wait a few more years before really starting to look into this market.
That's probably fair. I can say that is as cool as this technology looks, and the idea about these vertical takeoff and landing vehicles is interesting. I am not sure I want any of my neighbors buying one if they were to come to market soon, because there's a lot of ways that could go wrong for me, right? With people flying around in these things. And I'm afraid, Jose, look, in one more serious note here, I have some concerns that we are looking at this, the excitement over this is similar to the excitement we saw about self-driving cars a decade plus ago, 15 years ago. And where are we on self-driving cars? The answer is we don't really have them yet. These things take a long time in terms of when they actually become viable commercial products. And I think you're right. I think we're a little bit a ways away from when that's going to happen with this technology here. Um,
And I don't know, Toby, as maybe sometimes I might just be biased based on prior experience. Well, I never owned this stock. This was definitely one of those stocks that came through a SPAC during this COVID era. And a lot of them, at one point, I think this stock dropped to like $2 back after like kind of that whole COVID um, bull market that we had, and then we kind of saw a bit of a downfall. So I don't know if it's just also just the negative bias of how it's been in the past that might be blinding me a little bit. So I'm gonna say that just maybe there might be some bad bias on my end.
okay, that's fair. Um, Next Thursday we get Broadcom, Jose. Thursday on March 6th. You excited about Broadcom's earnings report?
Oh yes, this is actually I forgot we're still not done in the semiconductor space. We have Broadcom and we have Marvell
Hmm.
probably the week after, which both deal with ASIC solution. I just I don't own the stock. I don't own Broadcom. I own Marvell. I'm just excited to hear more and get just more data points about the AI space, Toby.
Yeah.
Because both of these designed the custom chips for the AI for big tech players. So I would love to just see that. Hey, look, this market continues to evolve. So while I'm not a shareholder, it's one that I love to listen to for more data points.
Yeah, and that's a contender potentially for your $1 trillion market cap club one day in the not too distant future if they keep doing what they're doing. Do you see NVIDIA entering the CPU market? Question from Foolist just now. Uh, they've announced plans for that, right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, so they have a CPU already, right, for their
Yeah.
data center space. So for the data center market, they do have a CPU, and it's definitely doing well as um, the for example, one of their I believe it's going to be one of their best products is called the GB200. So it's the Grace Blackwell 200 system. The Grace is the CPU. So they're definitely moving into data center and they have a product there. They just recently announced kind of a CPU for kind of not the consumer space. Toby was more kind of like for AI developers, AI learnings, and that was their Digit Zero, which again was a CPU with partnerships with MediaTek. So they do have
Okay.
that for kind of like the developers. There have been some rumors floating around, Toby, that now that they have one for the developer space, it's not too hard to transition from that developer computer to kind of like a consumer space. So
Hmm.
I think I don't know if Nvidia would want to enter that. The consumer market is very competitive, which causes
Yeah.
some dilutions in margins. So if they do enter, I believe it's going to be very similar to everything else where they might only focus in like those top tier laptops where it's
Right.
very low competitive and high margins. So if they do, I don't think it's going to be for mass consumer use. It's going to be for maybe your content creators who need a $3,000-$4,000 laptop or some other form of engineer or somebody else that is willing to pay that hefty price for an expensive laptop.
Yeah, or people who have more money than they know what to do with and just want to have the best CPU on the market for their gaming PC, huh? Well, that could be a market for them, uh, targeting the high end gaming. Yeah, we'll see. Um, so let's do this. We got a minute left. This is a question from Let It Ride. Uh, Ask you, Jose. I'll answer this too. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 is met expectations. Where would you rate Nvidia's earnings in regard to your expectations? So, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think of this earnings report from Nvidia?
So I think if I was to rate it, it would be probably close to 5 or 6. I did a previous article on the full Toby, and I mentioned in that full video that for revenue, I was expecting about 39.5 billion in revenue. We got
Okay.
39.3. And then I was expecting, I gave a range of 42 to 43 billion dollars in guidance, and that's what we actually ended up getting. So, I think we got 43 billion in guidance. So it met my expectations there. I think the only one that might have lacked was the margins. I didn't really have one, but it was definitely a little bit lower than expected. But Nvidia did give some great color for the rest of the years and kind of the technology innovation. So 5 to 6 is where I would give my based on my expectations.
Interesting. I'm going to go 7 here, but I think my expectations were lower than yours. to start. I was honestly expecting that maybe this might be the quarter that they just come in a little shy of what Wall Street was targeting. I expected them to beat their own expectations. Um, but so for me, they exceeded what I thought would happen, and I think it's a solid quarter from this very, very fine company. All right, that's the top of the hour, Jose. So we're good. We're done here. Thank you for tuning in, my friends. Thanks, Jose. I loved chatting with you about NVIDIA. This was a great hour. This was a fun
Appreciate
time.
it, Toby, and we had some great questions about it. So I'm lucky I was still fresh in my brain.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We are going to end our coverage of Full 24 today, but we're going to start up again tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. So please come back and join us again then. And let me give a shout out to those working behind the scenes for us today, Jose. We got Bart Shannon and Mike McMahon, Pro Shop guy, running us right now, and a lot more who you viewers don't see that are working behind the scenes all day long to make this happen. So we appreciate them. But thank you again, and we will see you tomorrow. Fool on, everyone.